To talk more about this, we're joined now by Professor Farid Esack from the University of Johannesburg. Very good evening to you, Professor Esack. Thank you for your time. What did you make of Minister Ronald Lamola's statements there, as, of course, he made that call for all states to urgently recognize Palestinian statehood?
Well, it was framed in a slightly more progressive way than what has been forthcoming from the more the outliers also in terms of the Western responses to the idea of a two-state solution and pushing for the recognition of the Palestinian state right now. But basically, it was orthodoxy framed in somewhat more progressive terms. Of course, South Africa is in the forefront of calling for the statehood, for the recognition of statehood for the Palestinians. But there is really nothing new in that. The forum is, of course, new. It was called by the Saudis and the French, and that is significant. But both the Saudis and the French are really representative of another orthodoxy, slightly to the more progressive part also of where the Western powers find themselves at the moment.
What impact is the broader recognition of Palestine by countries like South Africa having on efforts towards a two-state solution under international law?
Well, the one is the recognition by a country like South Africa, and let's not fool ourselves.
Yeah.
South Africa's currency internationally is of limited value, really. I mean, there was this brave move, of course, very, very consequential, of South Africa taking Israel to the International Court of Justice. That's a very, very brave move, and it does have an impact, but it has an impact far more on the optics of the situation than actual conditions on the ground inside Palestine. And nor will the call for the recognition of Palestinian statehood, nor will that currently have significant changes as far as the genocide that the Palestinians are facing is concerned. But then this on the one hand, and on the other hand, I mean, this incrementalist approach to justice for the Palestinian people should not be dismissed that easily. I do think that it remains consequential for the Palestinians, if not in the immediate terms. It does signify something positive in the long run.
And what about the impact here at home and the relations, for one, with our breaking news this evening, Professor, that US President Donald Trump has said that he could perhaps not make it to the G20 summit in South Africa come November. How has South Africa's involvement in a case such as this impacted geopolitics and relations?
Well, I mean, quite clearly, it has not benefited South Africa's relationship with the United States. And South Africa's ongoing being in the forefront of advocacy for the Palestinians and its own anti-genocidal position in the international community, all of this bodes ill for South Africa's immediate relations for as long as the United States is governed by Trump. So that is as downhill as it can go, as your reporter earlier on mentioned. It's as down, but one cannot underestimate the further damage to this relationship. But this, of course, then depends on how central that relationship is for us. It is important, very, very important economically, but it's not going to come at the cost in any way of South Africa's jettisoning or abandoning its own commitment to the values of human rights, and inside South Africa to inclusivity and corrective action as far as the apartheid economy was concerned. So it's a tough one for South Africa because both in terms of its values and in terms of the vision of the country, there's just no ways that the country can abandon its path. The one redeeming factor is that Trump is certainly not a highly regarded fellow in the international community, not even by other Western powers. And so South Africa is not seen by them as a maverick. All of them universally recognize Trump as the maverick, as the one that's out of step with the rest of the world. And that in some ways means that South Africa is not an outlier as far as the international community is concerned. It is in fact very much a part of mainstream.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the whole world, given America's centrality to the world's economy, the whole world has to either pretend that they go along with it, or has to retain some kind of quietism in the face of the lunacy that we see coming from the Trump White House.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion. We're going to have to leave it there with Professor Farid Esack from the University of Johannesburg.